Well, good afternoon and welcome. Thank you so much for being here this afternoon for this webinar called Early Literacy, Let's Continue the Learning, a conversation about literacy leadership and the MTSS model. This webinar is brought to you today through a partnership between the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education and the Massachusetts Reading Association. My name is Catherine Tarka. I'm the Director of Literacy and Humanities at the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, and I'll be your host today. This webinar is being co-hosted by DESE and the Massachusetts Reading Association, Greater Boston Reading Council. I'm joined today by three fabulous women representing the Massachusetts Reading Association to co-lead this event: Leandra Elion, Sarah Fennelly, and Lisa Rice. We're so glad to have you join us today as we hear from our featured speakers, Laura Menz and Christina Pena, as we continue the learning about evidence-based early literacy, and specifically today, how district literacy leadership can support this work through a multi-tiered system of support. This meeting is being recorded. We'll talk more about logistics in just a moment. I'd like to now ask my colleague, Sarah Fennelly from MRA, to walk us through the agenda.
All right, everybody, welcome. So here's a quick look at what we're going to be doing today. We're going to start with some background, and we're going to do a mini dive into the Mass Literacy Guide with Catherine. Then I'll speak about the partnership between MRA and DESE. But most of our time will be spent in a panel discussion. And after that panel discussion, we will have some time for questions, followed by a reminder about our next webinar. And back to you, Catherine.
And just a tech check for my fellow panelists, you are seeing the agenda on the screen, yes?
Yes.
Okay, fantastic. All right, so thank you, Sarah. As you know, participants, this webinar is being recorded. Today's recording will be posted on the Mass Literacy site within about a week or two. You can visit the Mass Literacy Guide, Mass Literacy site, top resources page to find the recording of today's webinar, as well as recordings of all our many previous Mass Literacy webinars. A page with all of the links that will be referenced in today's presentation is being dropped into the chat for you right now. We call this our link sheet. You can reference the link sheet for any links that are mentioned in today's presentation, so you don't have to rush and scramble to write things down as they're shared or worry about losing track of any links. The link sheet does include a link to the top resources page that I just mentioned, where you'll be able to find a recording of today's webinar. And if you have any questions during today's webinar for our esteemed panelists, please do use the Q&A feature. We'll be monitoring that, and we'll get to as many of your questions as we can. One other housekeeping thing I want to mention is the transcription feature. You may be seeing live transcription appear on your screen. And to control this feature, you can use the transcription button that appears on the bottom of your screen. To get started, we'll talk a little bit about Mass Literacy, an initiative that many folks here today are already familiar with. Mass Literacy is a statewide effort to empower our educators with the evidence-based practices for literacy that all students need. What you're looking at right now is a picture of the Mass Literacy Guide homepage. The Mass Literacy Guide, as many of you are very well familiar with at this point, is an interactive site that includes research, information, and resources to empower educators with evidence-based practices and information for early literacy. The Massachusetts Reading Association was an important partner in the development of the Mass Literacy Guide, and the department is proud to continue to partner with MRA again today to bring you this webinar in support of our shared belief that evidence-based instruction provided within schools and classrooms that are culturally responsive and sustaining will put our youngest students on a path toward literacy for life. When you explore the Mass Literacy Guide, you'll find a wealth of information regarding literacy teaching and learning. There's a little bit of everything: information on using complex text, fluent word reading, language comprehension, students experiencing reading difficulties, equity in literacy, and the importance of literacy leadership, which is really one of the main topics we'll be discussing today. Here, what you see is an image drawn from the Mass Literacy Guide, which represents a multi-tiered system of support for literacy. Learning about how to effectively lead a multi-tiered system of support, or MTSS, is particularly relevant for literacy coaches, principals, administrators, and curriculum coordinators. The components here are represented in gears to show that these things fit together like a well-oiled machine. And as you can see, the main parts or gears are database decision-making, tiered instruction, professional learning, and scheduling, staffing, and materials. And they're all centered around a literacy leadership team at the school or district level. In their roles as literacy leaders, the resources and information that our panelists, Laura and Christina, will speak to today are connected to all these areas. And if you were with us at our most recent 2 webinars, you know that the use of data to inform instruction within a model of tiered instruction has been an ongoing theme and something that will certainly continue to come up in all of our conversations about evidence-based early literacy. Now I'd like to welcome back my MRA partner, Sarah, to the mic to share a little bit about the partnership between MRA and DESE.
Thank you, Catherine. So the MRA members, we took an active role in helping to create these literacy guides. Members were able to review content. They gave feedback and suggestions for the literacy initiative. So, you know, just like with DESE, we are also strong supporters of evidence-based literacy practices, particularly in early literacy when students are just beginning to learn to read. It's very important that these are in place. So in talking about the organizations themselves, so the Mass Reading Association has been around for a while. I've been a member for many years. Its goal is to promote literacy for all learners through professional development, through research. We have publications. We also provide advocacy. And through the Mass Reading Association, we also have local councils, depending on where you are in the state. The council that I belong to is the Greater Boston Reading Council. It's a nonprofit organization. It's open to everyone interested in literacy and the teaching of reading. It's an affiliate. We've had, since I've been a member, we have held our own conferences, mini conferences in the fall. We do provide, we also have done community events and other things to promote literacy in all aspects, from not just in school, but with families. So if this, you know, just to plug us a little bit, if this is something you might be interested in, especially if you're in our area, Greater Boston area, on that link sheet, you will find a Google form. And if you're interested in becoming a part of this organization, either MRA or Greater Boston or both, this form will show us that you are interested and we would be in touch. All right, thank you. And I'm going to send it back to Catherine so we can get started with our panel.
So bear with us, everybody. We seem to have just lost a connection briefly. So I don't know, Sarah, are you ready to launch in with the questions and start the panel discussion? So I think we should get right down to it, because we have Laura and Christina right here. So
exactly,
hand it over to you.
Well, before we get started, why don't you guys introduce yourselves and your roles, so we can kind of see who you are and where you're, you know, where the questions are going to be going. So, and then I will start with our questions. Laura, why don't you start?
Hi, everyone. I'm happy to be here to participate in this discussion today. I'm Laura Menz. I'm the Director of Literacy in Springfield Public Schools. We have about 26,000 students. My work is predominantly in the early ed and elementary areas, pre-K to 5. I'm a Springfield native, having been pretty much educated in Springfield and raised my own children here who are now teachers here, and my grandchildren go to school here. So I'm completely invested in all of the outcomes for our community, but especially reading. It's my passion. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, everyone. My name is Christina Pena. I'm over right next door to Laura here in Chicopee. We're a district of about 8,000 students, and I've been with the district for about 18 years now, and I'm an instructional data specialist. I work out of the district office, and I help support all of our schools with anything curriculum based.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the introductions. I'm going to ask you to kind of elaborate just a little bit more, describing your journeys to this evidence-based early literacy. So how did you get to the point where you felt like this was the best practice for seeing success with students reading? So Christina, why don't you start with that?
So I began in the district as a 4th grade reading teacher, and then a 4th grade classroom teacher. And then I became an interventionist in reading and math and a literacy coach at both the middle school and the elementary level. So I was very, very lucky to have started in this district back with the Reading First days. So that really put so many evidence-based literacy initiatives in place. And it started in a couple of schools and slowly snowballed to other elementary schools, and then up to the middle school level, and even up to the high school level. So I've kind of seen it from like where a seed was planted and it slowly grew, and we've just been refining practices and keeping up with the current research ever since.
Wonderful, thank you. Laura, same question.
Well, I came into teaching around the time guided reading and balanced literacy was really being launched in Massachusetts. And I too saw Reading First, but as a struggling newer teacher, I really struggled with the kiddos who were struggling. And I was lucky in the beginning, I didn't have too many. And then over time, I didn't really know what to do for those kids. And I went back to school to get my master's and become a reading specialist, and then to go on into admin. And my questions never really got answered. And I would do my own independent study, and I'd find the research kind of contradicted what I was being asked to do. Then over time, we did do the Reading First as well in the district, but we were also very strongly planted in this balanced literacy, whole language type of approach to teaching, and it wasn't working for all our kids. So there were a few of us who just started spearheading some of this work. We started getting together with one of our curriculum providers and really looking at what was evidence-based, looking at ed reports, reading, everything we could get our hands on. And then most recently, as we started adopting these newer curriculums that were newer to us, we started joining some of the online science of reading groups that are out there, really studied mass literacy site. If you haven't had a chance, and I know Catherine did a great job introducing it, really helpful to me and my team. And then the MTSS site as well. We're currently really working on that and studying that blueprint. So my journey's not over. We're in the middle of that journey. I don't even think we're close to the end. We've made some nice progress, and we're seeing some really nice positive changes in our students and in our educators who are really learning about some of these evidence-based approaches that are new to most of them.
All right, thank you so much. Thank you. That's a great answer to that question. So I have another question for both of you. So since Laura, you're here, maybe I'll start with you this time. What are some of the literacy goals, because you're now working with this MTSS, working towards it?
Yeah.
What goals do you have for literacy, and what support systems or strategies do you have in place already? What ones do you think you still need to go to get to reach your goals?
Sure. So we have many policies and plans in our district. We have a strategic plan, but recently, I want to say last year, my tiny team and I really started thinking about those goals, and we adopted a belief statement, and we actually opened that belief statement with something from the ILA. And if you don't mind, I'd like to read it to you. The opening sentence is from the ILA. We believe that literacy is the ability to identify, understand, interpret, create, compute, and communicate using visual, audible, and digital materials across the disciplines. And then we go on to say, In Springfield Public Schools, we strive to provide developmentally appropriate, evidence-based and research-based curriculums and instruction that meet students where they are as learners. And we strive to provide resources that honor our students as individuals and as members of cultural groups who contribute to and bring richness to our schools and our community. We believe in providing access to diverse and accurate texts and in providing experiences that support our students learning about themselves and about others in our diverse community and world. And I open every meeting with my monthly meeting with that statement as a reminder to what the work is and to what our goals are. But when I think about some of the more formal structures that we follow, we have our district strategic plan, and the most recent one that's exiting called for us to expand our curricular resources, making sure they're aligned to the Mass standards, which we've long done that. To focus on literacy across all curriculums with an emphasis in the early grades. Mm-hmm. And I think that's where most of you here today are sitting, in that thought mindset, right? That we have to do it early, because when we don't do it early, it's harder to do later. And so we made sure we're doing that by purchasing materials that meet those criteria. In doing that work in the selection of curriculums over the past few years and bringing in some newer, more evidence-based curriculums, we've made sure that they're highly rated through Ed Reports. And then in our most recent curriculum adoption for grades 3 to 5, we really took advantage of the DESE Curate process. I had someone on my team who went through that program, and we were really able to select something that met our needs, and that was in the evidence-based world, in thinking about highly rated curriculum materials. We also, my team provides guidance around the literacy block in the schools. We ensure significant time on literacy learning that addresses all components. We most recently had to be flexible and make some changes. We've been analyzing and watching some small group data around some of our newer curriculums, and we were just getting started before the pandemic, and we started to see some really challenging data when we went remote in last year. So we made a real shift in our literacy block, allowing for more small group time around those evidence-based practices in the foundational standards. We're starting to see some headway there, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. And then the other piece that we're still working on is this MTSS plan. We had started taking bites out of really focusing that. We were more in line with the older RTI type model, although probably not even that well established with that before the pandemic. And we started making some changes, and most recently we've convened some people to really start working on that MTSS document. So right now we're focused on the core, but we do realize we have lots of work to do on the MTSS document. So that's where we are with that.
Wonderful. Thank you. That was, every time I thought, I was all set to ask another question on top of it, but you answered it right away. So that's great. Thank you. Christina, I'm going to ask you the same question, thinking of your district right now. What are your goals? What systems do you already have in place at the district level or at your school level, to incorporate and encourage, this, the evidence-based literacy, particularly with the younger students?
So we also have the strategic, improvement plan with long-term goals, but this year we really had to end up pivoting. Our biggest literacy goal ended up being tackling the learning loss that our students, especially at the K2 level, have experienced over the course of the last 2 years. Our teachers really were facing things that they've never really encountered before, just the scope of the learning loss that happened. So we really tried to be mindful of the stress that our teachers were under and immediately put some new resources in to help support them that didn't require a lot of extra effort on their part, because we really wanted them to focus on the evidence-based literacy practices that they are doing, that they know that they work. So some of the things that we immediately put in in place this year were the high dose tutoring through the GEAR grant from DESE. We also did the acceleration academies through DESE during the summer, and then came up with our own version to help support learning loss in both literacy and math. We also ended up subscribing to a 24-hour digital tutoring service to support our high school students as well. So it doesn't matter if it's 2 a.m., 4 a.m., they can log in and talk to a real person, and they use the Socratic method in order to kind of help the student think out the problem. So we've seen success in that as well. And then to support our youngest students, we also immediately purchased a very easy to implement phonemic awareness program for all of our PK to 1 students, since that was something that was lost during the remote learning piece. And then we have continued on with our district-wide literacy meetings that happen about once a month. I run those meetings, and we've really tackled the DESE literacy guide during those meetings. So we take a different component and dive in. We do kind of these mini PD sessions on the science of reading and just dive into that information, troubleshoot things that are going on in the building. We're always looking at the data and trying to, react and find ways to support our teachers that aren't going to burden them, because they are really stressed out this year. We've continued to focus on MTSS and continue to develop that. This is our final year of our current core program that we use in K-5. So right now we are diving into ed reports and curate and looking to see whether or not we're upgrading to the newest edition of our current core program, or if we're going to another highly rated program. My office currently is full of samples, and we have a team with representatives from every single building that are going to be meeting to dive into those ed reports and curate, because high quality materials truly make a difference. They just even the playing field for teachers. So that way, hey, here's a starting point. They're not searching everywhere for whatever they can find. There's a starting point. There is no unicorn core program out there. None of it's perfect, but it gives teachers a starting point, so that way they can focus on teaching the students and differentiating the instruction to identify those gaps and fill those gaps.
Thank you. Wow, that's great. I love the idea of the tutoring. I'd never heard of that before. That sounds amazing. All right, so I have a question here for Laura. Can you talk a little bit about how your school or district schedules are organized to support this tiered instruction? So what are the scheduling? How difficult is it scheduling? What are the, everybody have different roles. How are you organizing and planning for assessments and screenings and all of that?
Sure. So as I mentioned, we really had to pivot and think about what we were doing in tier 1. And I'm going to talk a little bit about a tier 2, tier 3 intervention that we moved into tier 1 for the small group time. And I want to just qualify that with saying this focusing on foundational standards alone isn't the answer, right? We still have to do other things in the other areas of comprehension and fluency and writing. But I'm just going to talk a little bit about how this change required us to make some shifts about who's doing what and when. So prior to this shift, we had homeroom teachers teaching in small group, perhaps the old guided reading approach. And we had what might be called support teachers pulling out and doing interventions with children at different times. To make this new approach work for this year, knowing that we had to accelerate, as Christina talked about, it was all hands on deck. So what we had to do was get everyone trained in this program that we're using to accelerate learning in small group around the foundational standards. So now these interventionists are pushing in during small group time, and all students are being met with during that time to get what they need based on where they place in this explicit systematic approach. So that's a shift for us. We're hoping if we are able to accelerate enough students that we can shift back to doing it the way we did before. We may not be able to because the pandemic didn't stop, did it? It just keeps
No.
rearing its ugly head. And, attendance for teachers and students alike has been compromised this year. So when you think about explicit and systematic approaches, large interruptions, if students are out for 10 days because of COVID, they've missed considerable sequences of their lessons. So we're looking at that data carefully and we're watching it. We're hoping to go back to a normal schedule, but if not, we'll keep it this way. The data tells us what to do. I hope I
Wonderful.
answered your question okay.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's great. I like the fact that you have to, taking in and you're continuing with your flexibility. You're saying, this is what we have to do now. This is because I think that's a lot of what MTSS is just like everything else. You have to look at what's working and what doesn't work and not necessarily stick with it just because we did the same thing last year. Well, last year's a whole different year and hopefully next year will be a completely different year, hopefully for the better, and can look at it. So that's great. Thank you for that. So I have a question here for both of you. So why don't we have Christina start? You guys have talked about all the different things that you are putting into place, and it sounds amazing, all the different programs, all the different work. So I guess my question is, what are you seeing for results? What have you seen so far using this? What kind of growth are you seeing? Are you seeing it in one aspect over another? What, I guess, what evidence have you found that this literacy, that this is working? So Christina, why don't we start with you?
Well, I think the biggest evidence that we have is what happened when we kind of had to step away from evidence-based literacy the last 2 years. Our scores just immediately tanked to levels that we've never seen before. Our students in the last 2 years didn't get the consistent access to the best literacy practices that we know worked. We were all just trying to survive. Now that we're back, I mean, granted, it's not a normal year. We're dealing with lots of absences, just like Laura is, both teachers, staff, and students. But for the most part, we've returned back to getting those hands-on, explicit activities, the small group instruction. We do mostly all push-in. So the interventionist comes in and they're all in groups working, tackling, we're identifying the specific gaps that students have with various screeners and trying to tackle those exact gaps in these small groups. We're focusing on explicit systematic instruction, early intervention, and then also consistent data collection and meetings, which just honestly didn't happen last year. And with all of those things, it's only been a few short months, and we've already seen huge growth in scores just from September to December. Our students are not, it's not just that they're hitting those typical target or those ambitious targets, they're surpassing those ambitious game targets that we have had set for them. So we're, they're not where they need to be yet. It took them 2 years. We can't fix it in 4 months, but we're getting there and we're closing those gaps. And that's what we're focusing on.
Oh, that sounds great. Thank you. Yeah, I like the fact, you're saying, we're working on 2 years worth of kind of deficits and, you can't get it up, but it sounds like, what you're doing is work. And I like the fact that, what you said was you tried going, we did what we had to do the past 2 years. But there's evidence right there to show that the literacy evidence-based practices you were doing before COVID, and you can see what happens when you couldn't use them, the results went down and now they're working back up again. So that's almost just as great, evidence as anything else. The fact that you're trying something else and it didn't work as well as the evidence-based practices you're doing currently and did before all this happened. So Laura, the same question. How do you know that this is working? What kind of results have you seen in your district?
So I think a very similar narrative as Christina just described, but I might add, when we look at data, perhaps triangulating it, we're seeing some real consistency. It matches. We look at our diagnostics, we're looking at the set instruction data for mastery checks. We're looking at our unit assessments and we're seeing the same progression. We're seeing a growth curve. And we're also seeing, similar to what Christina said, those who are in school are making progress, right? And I think I talked about that, a couple of minutes ago. Those who are consistently in are making that accelerative growth. So there's some high hope there. I think for me, there might even be another data set, not just that raw data that we look at, but anecdotally, when I visit classrooms, I'm seeing a little bit of a shift. Thinking about our educators, for us, using these approaches in small groups, shifting from guided reading to something that was more explicit and systematic was a real change for many of our educators. And we're using this approach in 3 to 5 as well, not just the early grades. And think about that when you're a 5th grade teacher, you're not expecting when you get hired that you're going to teach phonics, perhaps, right? Mm-hmm. We've asked our educators in the midst of a pandemic to learn this new approach, this new curriculum, along with a grades 3 to 5 core curriculum, and they've taken it on. And I will be completely honest. Of course, there was resistance. There's always resistance to change. But during a pandemic, these folks have really dug in and really done some study and some learning and are really following the program and doing it with some success. And when I say success, I'm saying that's anecdotal, right? I'm going in and I'm seeing teachers follow a program, teach explicitly. And I'm also seeing kids confident and independent and being able to apply and transfer what they're learning in that small group into the whole group. So I have high hopes that we're going to see on this next data collection round that we're currently collecting some real movement for kiddos, not just in phonics, but across the board and in how they're comprehending grade level text and in how they're writing.
Oh, that's great. That's great. You kind of led into one of the questions that I was going to ask next. So I'm just going to modify it a little bit. You mentioned that, for a lot of this was a, especially for the upper elementary, this was, taking on something new. And doing something that, like you said, when they're hired, say for 5th grade, they're not expected to teach phonics. But you said, they took it on. So what was your magic trick to do that? How did you, because again, me being an educator as well, it's like one more thing, but how did you get everyone, this is going to be eventually a question for both, get everyone on board with this? Because I'm, like you said sure there was some resistance, but what did you kind of do as a motivational strategy to bring this on? So Laura, why don't you start with that?
Well, we started some messaging early at the end of last school year in anticipation of this, that we were shifting. And we started with our administrators and our school-based coaches. And we did some PD, some front loading with educators and did some messaging in those PD sessions. We have a fairly large district. So at the start of the school year, we have what we call August PD. And I couldn't be in every session. So what we did is we recorded videos and we asked the consultants who were helping to facilitate those professional development sessions to share that message from me that talked about how we were aligning all these resources and how we needed to be all hands on deck. So that was shown at the beginning of all sessions to all educators. So they got that message. I'm present in all the PD sessions. When we have consultants come in, I greet everyone. I talk about where we are and where we're going. I'm hoping I'm a morale booster and showing appreciation because this is hard work all the time, but especially now. We have lots of platforms within our district that we use to communicate with educators, online platforms that we share resources. So we tuck messages in. We do a lot of emailing with our school-based coaches who really are the face of the work with their teachers because they are the ones, they're coaching, they're leading PLCs, they're taking back the messaging and the training that we provide for them monthly. So we've got a couple of different avenues around that, but I think the best avenue is relationships and trying not to be someone at the district level who just dictates, statements or mandates that gets in there and is following along in the learning with those educators and going out and meeting them and seeing the work in action. and giving warm feedback, right? Now more than ever, educators need warm feedback because they need to know how much they're appreciated. And the fact that, they might make mistakes, but their intentions are good. And when we give them warm feedback, the corrective feedback is a little bit easier to take when we've developed those relationships and really honored their work.
Great, thank you. Christina, same thing. How did you get everybody, how do you work towards getting everybody on board?
So, at the end of the day, we all want what is best for our students. And, the big push now is equity. And really the best way to ensure equity for all is to start with literacy for all. If we can set up every student to be able to read, then we are evening the playing field for all. So that has really helped. And honestly, this grassroots science of reading approach with all the Facebook groups and so forth has really, encouraged some of our staff to be like, hey, look, that's what we've been doing for years. It really is working. We don't need to be, constantly trying to reinvent the wheel. Like, there's identifying the areas that we're doing really well in, identifying areas for improvement, identifying other areas where we just need to fine tune it a little bit to follow the current reading research. We're really lucky here in Chicopee. We really try to encourage a hats off approach where if a student needs extra support, they get it. It doesn't really matter if they're on a 504 or IEP, we follow those, but we don't have to wait till one of those plans is formally in place before we get that child help. Early intervention works wonders. If we don't want to wait till the student is in second grade before they get any sort of literacy intervention, we want to try to, intervene as early as possible. I once heard where reading students are like, picture, a speedboat versus a giant tugboat. That speedboat is a kindergartner. The tugboat is a fourth grader. Which one is easier to turn around? That struggling kindergartner. Identify those gaps, fill in those gaps, and get that student on the right track. If we wait till fourth grade, it becomes harder and harder to turn it around for these students.
Right. Yeah. Oh, go ahead. Yeah, I completely agree 100% because I myself teach, work with upper elementary, middle school reading, and I have a lot of tugboats. Yep. I work with a lot of tugboats. In that case, I love that imagery. I think that sounds perfect. So I think I have time maybe for one more question, and this mostly has to do again with kind of educators, because I know I'm sure a lot of the people here in the webinar are saying, oh, this sounds great, but what if I go into a school and I don't know as much of this stuff? How do I, because the goal here, it sounds like, is the consistency so that everyone in the school is working towards the same goal and they're working together. So, coming where you have teachers from a variety of different backgrounds and knowledge levels, how do you plan for, making sure everybody's has the same knowledge of the instruction? In other words, how do you plan for, say, professional development, seeing what people know, what they need to know? How do you align that with the plan? How do you work to make sure everybody's kind of on the same page? Christina, why don't we start with you this time?
So we have the equivalent of 5 full PD days built into our schedules. We have 3 before, and we have election day, and then our elementary schools have 2 half days in January and March, and our secondary schools have a full day in December. And we also have half-day collaboration days scheduled into the schedule for our elementary school teachers, and then it's built into the schedule for our high schools. This allows the teachers really to dive into the new knowledge and make it, put it into practice into their classrooms. We constantly get input from all stakeholders, principals, data, coaches, teachers, paras. We do a needs assessment for our PD every single year. So in the springtime, it's a giant survey. Hey, what do you feel your weekend? What do you need? We also offer choice PD days where teachers can pick from a menu of options to if they feel that they need more PD in a certain area, they're able to get it. In addition to the site-based days and the district-based days where we push out district-wide or school-wide initiatives. So there's really lots of opportunity to really differentiate the kind of PD that all of our stakeholders get, so that way they can be the best teacher that they can be.
Oh, that sounds amazing. Oh, I love the different options. And I love the idea of a needs assessment at the beginning of the year. I think that is a great idea. All right, I'm going to turn that question over to you, Laura. What, as far as, you know, making sure all of your educators are kind of on the same page?
Kind of tackle it a little differently than Chicopee does at this point. I love the idea of the choice, but we've been really aligned to making sure our PD really supports the implementation of the high quality materials and making sure educators are really well developed in their knowledge of those practices that support those resources. So like Chicopee, we have our August professional development days. We have our 3 school-based days typically in a normal year. We didn't use them this year. And I do after school sessions or in-school sessions. What we learned during the remote learning was that we were able to get teachers more face-to-face during the school day because we could get them on Zoom. We didn't have to drag them to a PD center across town, and that they could get on quickly, and principals were able to arrange for coverage a little bit more easily. So we took advantage of that. So we've offered a lot of PD sessions around our curriculums, and we've offered the choice there, like could they sign up for it during the day or during the morning or during the afternoon, or did they wish to take part in a paid after school session? So we've tried to do those and add that variety there, but all really lined up with the work that we're doing to implement curriculum and assessments, really making it to be what they have to put into practice at this time. I hope we can get to where Chicopee is with the choice piece at some point, and I'm sure it's aligned very much to what they're doing, but right now we're not so much in the choice field.
All right, well, it still sounds like, you know, the fact that you're offering it at different times of the day and that it's making it available for educators. I mean, I don't know, how would we have survived this without with this pandemic, without Zoom and kind of seeing, you know, we're able now to do things like this. So I think that's wonderful.
Just one more thing we offer too, all of our school-based coaches run PLCs every week with either grade level teams or vertical teams. So what we do is we provide them with some resources that they can use, a menu of items that they can use in their PLCs to support what they're doing. So for example, if mastery assessments are being done, they might have a protocol they can use to look at the mastery assessments with their teachers. So we give them some guidance so that we're aligned across the district and that there's something for everyone during PLCs.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you. All right, well, our time is rapidly finishing up, so I'm going to give it back to Catherine. Thank you, Catherine. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you all so much. That was such a rich conversation with so many tidbits that I wish we could spend more time on. And I have been monitoring the Q&A. There's been a couple of really interesting questions asked, so I'm going to take the next 10 minutes to just pose you some questions, Laura and Christina, from the audience. So first question is about assessment. There's been some interest in knowing what universal screening assessments you use in your districts in Springfield and in Chicopee, and how you use assessments to identify students' areas of need so that you can provide tiered instruction that meets them at their area of need. So if you could just briefly share, and maybe Christina, will start with you. Maybe if you could share which universal screeners you use and then how you use that data, or perhaps data from a variety of sources to target students' instructional needs.
So we use Acadians in grades K to 5. In preschool, we use PELI. And then we also use NWEA MAP testing in reading and math from K to high school. So that one goes across the entire district. So those are the major screening assessments that we use, and we do them in the fall, winter, and spring, and we measure growth. In between, teachers also progress monitor using Acadian's passages as well. And then sometimes we need to drill down further. So we might use something informal like the PASS or the quick phonics inventory to truly identify the specific phonics deficits that a student might have to drill in deeper.
Laura, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. So in Springfield, in pre-K and K, they use at the beginning of the year, the early screening inventory, the ESI. That's more of a developmental type of a screener that they're using. And then in K to 8, we are an iReady district in reading and in math. So we are using iReady as our early literacy screener. And we're in the process of looking at other literacy screeners for pre-K to 3 right now. And of course, we use, we look at other measurements as well, unit assessments. We're an ANET district, so we have those assessments to look at and compare data with as well.
Great, thank you. And since you both mentioned kindergarten, there's another question that came in regarding the timing of universal screening in kindergarten. So can you share when your district first screens kindergartners on academic skills and literacy specifically, and why you've chosen to do that screening when you have? Some districts will do that immediately at the beginning of kindergarten. Other districts will wait a little bit longer in order for students to perhaps get acclimated to kindergarten before doing the universal screening. So can you share your experience with that issue?
So here in Chicopee, we do the Acadian subtests immediately within like that first week or 2 of kindergarten, because it's one-on-one, and the test administrator can also get a feel for the student as well, and since it's one-on-one, it's less scary. We do not do NWA map testing in kindergarten in the fall. We just skip that. It's too much we feel it's too much for kindergartners when they're first coming to school. Some of our students have never been in school before, so we don't want to scare them off. NWA can be somewhat intimidating. So we do start that in the winter time. But Acadians, we try to get that done within like the first week or 2 of school, just to have some data of where the students started, because we have some students that come in knowing all their letters that they can segment, and then we have others that have never seen letters before. So we really want to start identifying which students, might need extra intervention right from the day one.
That makes a lot of sense. How about in Springfield, Laura?
Well, in Springfield with the iReady reading diagnostic, we wait until mid-October because it's an online assessment. So we want to make sure we've done some work with students, getting them acclimated to the computer, some practice on the iReady platform before we actually look at that data. And again, really our eyes more on the mid-year data and the end of the year data with those kindergartners, because we know that it's an online assessment and we want to get some teaching and learning in before we really start to make some judgments on children based on that data.
Thank you for that. And this might be our last question. We'll see how we do for time. There's been a couple of different questions about the materials used in your districts for instruction. So if you're willing to share, if you could share what core program is used for K-2 literacy core instruction. And I know, Christina, you said Chicopee is actually about to make a selection decision. So you're on the cusp. And I know, Laura, you've more recently put new programs in place. So you can share where you are on that journey, the program currently used, as well as any primary resources that are utilized for Tier 2 and Tier 3 instruction. I'm sure there's a wide range of materials used for Tier 2 and Tier 3 because they're targeted at student need, but if there's any main programs or resources that are frequently used that you could share. And why don't we start with you for this one, Laura?
Okay, I'll start chronologically. I'll start with pre-K. Currently, our pre-Ks use a program to support any kind of academics that they're doing with the big day for pre-K. It was originally published by Scholastic, and then I think HMH took it over. It's now out of print. So we're actually searching for a new pre-K curriculum. We have it narrowed down to 3 and are going to go through a similar process to as what we did in selecting our 3 to 5 curriculum. In K-2, we use the Center for the Collaborative Classrooms, being a reader and being a writer. They were previously not in the green with Ed Reports, and we upgraded to their second edition, which addressed all of the areas of concern in their curriculums. And then in 3 to 5, we went through a very lengthy process where we engaged over 50 educators, stakeholders, in helping us select a grades 3 to 5 curriculum. And we landed with Savvis Learning's My View. And across the board, K to 5, what we're using right now, the program that I mentioned that we've pushed into tier 1 for small group instruction is SIPS. And that is the program that I believe you saw Margaret Goldberg use in one of her presentations with you. It is meant to be our systematic and explicit phonics approach, K to 5. And that's in tier 1 right now, but it's meant to be tier 2 and tier 3. And we use a few other tier 2 and tier 3 from recommendations by the special education department. And we're also pushing in Heggerty next year for phonemic awareness and phonological awareness in the early pre-K.
And that's one that we're very commonly hearing about across the state, knowing that many of the older core programs were not sufficiently addressing phonological awareness. A lot of districts are, if they're not able to make a full replacement at this time, they're looking at resources like Heggerty to address phonological awareness. Christina, why don't you bring us home by sharing the resources used in Chicopee?
So in preschool, they use an old Houghton Mifflin program that's out of date. We're part of the GLEAM Early Childhood Initiative. So we are going to be going through the review process next year to select something specifically for preschool. They did start using Heggerty this year, and then that Heggerty is also used in K and 1 across the district. For our core program, we use Wonders, the 2017 edition, K to 5. There are some areas that weren't rated well in Curate, but they have made those improvements. They've taken the feedback from Ed Reports and Curate and have made those changes in upcoming editions. So they have 2020 and then they just released 2023. So we are reviewing that as well. They've listened to a lot of our complaints and have fixed a lot of things. So we're excited to review that one. And then we're also reviewing 3 other programs as well that are highly rated in Curate and Ed Reports. One of them is My View for Savvis. So we'll see how that goes. We're just starting all the presentations and all of that good work. And then so that will begin starting in the fall for implementation. Next year will be our first implementation, whether we continue on with Wonders or whether we shift gears to a different program. For interventions, we always like to start with like a double dose, since all of our intervention is pushed into the classroom. Sometimes just getting a second dose, whether it's pre-teaching or reteaching the same concept that is used in the classroom, really fills that gap without confusing students, right? We don't want to throw every single program available at a student. So we really want to be mindful, but we do use, some Spire, we use Linda Mubel, a variety of different programs as, we get deeper into students needing more help. We also use some really great reading programs as well from their phonics suite.
Well, thank you both so much. Your wealth of expertise is really evident in your ability to talk so fluently about all these different programs and systems and structures that you have in place. I'm going to wrap up our panelist conversation with that, and just want to thank you both again so much for being part of this webinar and sharing your expertise. As we transition to closing, I just want to note that there were a couple of requests in the chat for a list of the programs that were just referenced. Not all of the programs have information that's been collated by DESE, but the core programs are all, there's information available on all the core programs that were mentioned within DESE's Curate project. So I think I'll just ask my colleague Allison, if you could put a link to DESE's Curate project in the chat. People want to learn more about any of the core programs that were mentioned. Take a look at the Curate project. And I do just want to note that any programs or products that were mentioned today represent the experience of the panelists and shouldn't be construed as a recommendation by DESE or by the Massachusetts Reading Association for that matter. So I'm going to attempt to reach for my screen. Can I just have a thumbs up if you can see the slide. Awesome. All right. And I'll invite all of my co-hosts and panelists to turn their cameras back on so that we can close out. And thank you again to our panelists and to Sarah for facilitating. It was really informative and inspiring. And to close us out, I'd like to invite Lisa Rice from the MRA back to share about a couple of new mass literacy supports and resources. And as Lisa is speaking, links to these resources will be dropped in the chat for you.
Great, thank you so much. I'm excited to talk a little bit about the mass literacy part of DESE's website. Mass literacy has lots of ways to support your evidence-based practice. First, be sure to check out the top resource page for the videos of the previous mass literacy webinars. And this will be where you can find today's webinar as well in the next week or so. Also at the top resource page, you will find useful tips to help you use the Mass Literacy Guide in the Where to Start document. This is a resource designed to support educators and administrators to get started with the Mass Literacy Guide with 6 evidence-based early literacy practices. It is included in the links document, which you can find in the chat. And to continue the learning about evidence-based early literacy practices, DESE also has an area where recommended reading is on their page as well. We hope you enjoyed today's webinar. Thank you again to our featured educators, Laura and Christina. Something that really stood out to me was the best way to achieve equity for all is to ensure literacy for all. So I will be using that quote many, many times. So thank you very much. That was fantastic. If you have any further questions or comments, you can reach out to the DESE Mass Literacy team through the Mass Literacy website. You can also connect with the Massachusetts Reading Association at our website at massreading.org. Both of these links can be found on the link sheet, which is in the chat. Before you sign off, we'd love to hear your feedback about today's webinar. Please take a moment to complete a very brief survey. The link's being dropped in the chat. It's also on the link sheet that you can find in the chat as well. It will also be sent to you tomorrow in a follow-up email. This concludes today's webinar. Thank you and have a great evening.